Hello there, I'm Park Howell, and I'm so glad you're with us today on the business of story. You know, as storytellers, we all want to produce viral, resilient stories that captivate and move our audiences to action, right? But that can be really hard. So I'm excited to have highly award-winning documentarian Roger Sorkin with us today to share how he approaches his storytelling to make as big of an impact on the world as possible. In October of 2019, I was in the Manhattan offices of CDP, the Carbon Disclosure Project. It's a nonprofit that works in the climate change world. I was there presenting a full-day storytelling training, teaching our 3 proven narrative frameworks to their colleagues. We had about 20 or so of their sustainability professionals in attendance, and I wanted to impress on each and every one of them the importance of humanizing and even having fun with their storytelling, especially given how complex their messaging was to help manage mindsets and behaviors around climate change and global warming. A new video had just come out from the Rainforest Alliance that was promoting Rainforest Alliance certified labels brands place on their products if they met the Alliance's stringent criteria for products that don't harm the rainforest. Given that a frog is the prominent visual on the label, the video is called Follow the Frog. Maybe you've seen it. I told my audience that I thought this was a powerful example of an important sustainability story that uses humor to cut through the noise and tickle the funny bone of consumers who might not otherwise give a damn. But some of the more serious folks in the room, well, they didn't give a damn. In fact, they didn't think it was funny at all. They thought it detracted from the important message of doing our part for climate change. So I'm curious what you think. Here is the soundtrack from this 3-minute video. Close your eyes and you can picture what's going on. Or open up our show notes and watch it for yourself. By the way, at the end, as you're listening to the tribal music, the storyteller is showing you where to look for the Rainforest Alliance labels on a myriad of products, demonstrating the reach they've already achieved within their program. Check it out.
You are a good person. You spend time with your family. You work out at the gym.
Come on, push.
You conserve water while showering. You like nice clothes. You give to charity. You recycle. You drive a Prius, but you use your bike when you can. You enjoy the occasional distraction at work. And you always send a card on Mother's Day. Always. But there's a part of you that tells yourself that you're not so good, that you could be doing more, that the world is falling apart at the seams, and all you've been doing is yoga. One day, you see that the rainforest is being destroyed at a staggering rate of 32 million acres a year. That's the equivalent of 1 football field every 78 seconds. You feel bad, angry, guilty. You've been apathetic for too long. You want to do something about it. You must do something about it. Well, this is what you're not going to do.
I quit!
You're not going to quit your job, leave your family, get on the next flight to Nicaragua, take a bus to the edge of the jungle, then hoof it across rivers, lakes, and streams on a quest to the very heart of the rainforest.
Take me to the heart of the rainforest.
You're getting closer. You're almost there. You have arrived.
You're not going to ingratiate yourself with the local tribesmen, go to great lengths to earn their respect and trust.
No.
It is around now you realize you're living out the cliché gringo fantasy of becoming an honorary native and leading the resistant forces. But screw it. If they could do it, so can you.
I'm gonna save you! This guy comes over here, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna pull a zafting bats right through him, right over here.
You're not going to coordinate and occupy the rainforest movement, realize it's hopeless, summon the power of the gods, lead a revolution against the deforesters and their multinational employers in an apocalyptic, once-and-for-all battle to save humanity, only to awaken 2 days later in an El Salvadorian hospital with 2 toes missing on your left foot,
Syria, I wanna go home!
hobble out of Central America, up through Mexico, across the Sierra Madre where you break down, have your first cigarette in 4 years, accidentally start a wildfire killing off the endangered species that once served as your occupational distraction, finally make it back home, only to find you've been replaced at work by a guy named TJ, and that things at home are not what they used to be. You're not going to do any of these things, but what you can do is follow the frog. Buying Rainforest Alliance certified products ensures the future of our rainforests, so that you don't have to do the things you shouldn't do anyway. Just follow the frog.
So what do you think? Is it hilariously effective or just stupid? You'll hear what today's guest thinks of it later in the show. Roger Sorkin is founder and executive director of the American Resilience Project, a nonprofit that uses film to advance public policy and strengthen civilization security. His films cover a range of topics, including transitioning away from fossil fuels, preparing for sea level rise, electrifying transportation, and more. Roger believes that when you, as a storyteller, tackle difficult, divisive, and complex subject matter, that there's one word to use in your approach, and this one word will make all of the difference in your success.
You're not going to be effective in your messaging if you can't understand as many different views of the world that exist, which is it's countless. So it's like a real job for us as storytellers to always be doing the research and the homework and always asking questions, always understanding that as much as we know, we're not going to ever know it all. If I had to boil that all down to one word, it's humility.
On today's show, you will learn how to put humility to work for you in your storytelling to produce more viral and resilient stories. It starts by understanding where your audience is coming from. What are the pitfalls, buzzwords, and rhetoric to embrace and/or avoid? Why framing your story from your audience's point of view is so critical to success, and the power of being hopeful in your messaging. Roger says in his experience that negative frames push people away. But don't gloss over the negatives. They're important to make your case. Just make sure that your story empowers your audience, is optimistic, and shows them the way forward. So let's say hello to award-winning documentary writer, director, and producer, Roger Sorkin. Roger, welcome to the Business of Story.
Thanks, Park.
Hey, man, it's great to have you here. Our mutual friend, John Martinson, introduced us. Now, John was the founder and former owner, he sold it, of China Mist Tea, which is a really amazing tea company out of Scottsdale, Arizona. And I met John when I was working as a professor of practice, a professor of storytelling at Arizona State University in the School of Sustainability. And he went through our executive master's course on sustainability, and I was teaching sustainable storytelling there. So John's a great guy. He's a hoot, and I'm just so glad that he made the introduction.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, he's great. He was one of our board members of our board of directors for a little while at American Resilience Project.
The American Resilience Project. Tell us a little bit about that and how and why did you start it?
So it's a nonprofit that makes films and essentially a film production company, but we're mission driven. And so we start with a focus on what's the change we'd like to see. Often that is a policy question. We talk to a lot of policy experts, folks at NGOs and advocacy groups, people who work on legislative committees as staffers, and we say, what's not only the thing you'd like to see, but what's actually possible in this next legislative session, considering the politics around this issue. And so we try to hone a really practical call to action out of all of our films. The sort of artist / storyteller in me sometimes gets really interested in a particular story, but I will then dial back my ambition and passion for it once I talk to someone who says, you know what, that's a great story, but that has no chance of passing the Congress or any state house in the country. So, good story for a film festival, maybe, but it's not going to do anything for the really targeted audience that you're really trying to reach. And that's one thing that we really focus on is that qualitative audience. It also takes a lot more money, I think, to get in front of mass audiences to really do promotion. I mean, unless you have a really super knock it out of the park film on a really exclusive issue of some kind. I think of Blackfish, a great film about
Oh, the killer
the
whale
exploitation
movie?
of sea mammals in aquariums. And so, it had a really strong effect when that came out. It was almost like a binary flip of the switch, where one day the film comes out, and then all of a sudden, all of these shows at aquariums using orcas and killer whales is no longer a thing. So they had
And why do you think that is?
I think it operated on a really emotional level. I mean, I think it's a very visual story, something everyone can relate to. It's a reason why a lot of environmental groups have, cuddly animals as part of their logos. And that's a debate, I know, among some of the environmental groups and among environmentalists, that it's not necessarily the most effective thing we can do to deal with climate change by just trying to save pandas, for example.
The World Wildlife Fund.
Folks don't want to really talk about ocean acidification because you can't make a nice cuddly logo out of it. That's one of the things that we try to do is distill these complex issues into something that has an emotional core that people can really relate to.
And Roger, how did you get into this? You, as a documentarian, storyteller, filmmaker, could be making stories and films about anything. Why did you choose to go this route?
So I started a video production company in DC about 20 or so years ago. I was doing work mostly for clients in the government and policy space. That's how I really kind of got into a real focus in public affairs. And I got a little bit frustrated with the way environmental and climate films were being made. It wasn't so much how they were made, it's what they wanted viewers to do and how they thought about that call to action after the film was watched. And it seemed often they were preaching to the choir. I mean, some of them stunningly beautiful films, really powerful and emotional, but not really reaching a wider audience. You had a lot of people nodding in agreement when Inconvenient Truth came out. And I'm sure that movie had some measurable effects. Maybe you can say people bought more Priuses after they watched Inconvenient Truth. But it got me thinking about the power of a trusted messenger. And while I don't mean any disrespect to Al Gore, and I applaud him for making that film, it just got me thinking that, half the country, no matter what, is going to see that as a political statement. And they're going to suddenly, it's going to become a politicized issue. It's almost an inescapable problem. I don't fault Al Gore for it, but it just got me thinking that maybe we have to think more carefully about the messengers that we have to tell these stories and the framing of the story. And I began thinking about, well, what is what do red states, conservatives, Republicans think about this movie? I don't know that they're going to watch it because the first thing they see is the name Al Gore on it. And so I started thinking about other ways to frame the climate debate, and I encountered through some work for a client at the time, the Quadrennial Defense Review in 2010 that the U.S. military puts out every 4 years, a document.
Say that again, the Quadrennial Defense Review?
Yes, the Quadrennial Defense Review. Every 4 years, they do an assessment of their military needs, their strategies, what do they need to accomplish the mission and execute the national security strategy. And in that particular document, it was the first time that they addressed climate change. And began talking about climate change as a threat multiplier. And when I saw those two words, threat multiplier, that was when I had the light bulb moment and decided that's the climate film I want to make. The one that brings in the national security question. The U.S. military is talking about this. And it occurred to me, I had not really doing any sort of survey about it, but my instincts told me that considering the U.S. military had an 80% approval rate at the time and was considered a more trustworthy entity, whatever you think of the U.S. military, I mean, those were just the facts. And I think comparable to, and I think it's even lower now for the U.S. Congress, it's like, at the time it was like an 11% approval rate. I think it's lower now. And so, well, why wouldn't I take the folks with the 80% approval rate and make them the trusted messenger? It was almost like a mathematical formula to me. And so I went out to interview 4-star generals and, square-jawed Marines and asked them, well, why are you doing this? What's important about transitioning the military away from fossil fuel dependence? And they didn't bring up pandas and polar bears. They said, you know what? Climate change is going to make it harder for us to do our mission. It's going to cost us more lives. It's going to cost us more taxpayer dollars. And that was it. It's blood and treasure at the end of the day. And so that became the framing of a film that I made called The Burden, which really just focused squarely on why fossil fuel dependence is a national security threat. Didn't talk much about climate change, but you know what? If we can accomplish the same goal, maybe we have different reasons, but if the path to solution is the same, then it didn't matter to me.
So you got to find common ground, don't you? Especially in very divisive subject matters such as climate change, global warming, or whatever. You got the far right that says it's a complete hoax. You got the far left whose hair's completely on fire. Either one of those is hard to get behind and believe. It's really that centrist group, those people in the middle, both Republican and Democrat, that have a level head about themselves that probably are going to enact real change. But how do you find that common ground?
I think you have to understand what are the things that people care about. And you can't judge their initially. You can have your private judgments about, somebody valuing their guns or their pickup truck or whatever. But you have to accept the fact that everybody's human. Everybody, I'll go out on a limb and make an assumption that every person cares about the well-being of their family, the security of their home, how much money they spend, their food security, their physical health. And so you start with that, and you just don't forget that. I think about, it's become this idea you're not supposed to talk about politics at Thanksgiving. Well, I feel like that's a weakness. You should be able to talk about politics at Thanksgiving, but you have to do the work to understand how. You can't confront your uncle at the table and say, you know what, Uncle Frank, you're a bad guy because you drive a pickup truck and you love guns. If your goal is to get Uncle Frank to maybe think about using less oil in his life, start with that. Well, why should he? Well, Frank, you can save money. We can spend less of our national treasure having to go keep the shipping lanes open so that the oil gets through the Strait of Hormuz. And you just focus on that. So you got to do a little bit of research. We hear this phrase all the time: meet people where they are. It's a bit trite, but it's useful. I mean, you got to put yourself in someone else's shoes, and that's where emotional intelligence comes in. Which I think, as you know, in terms of storytelling, it's an emotional medium.
It really is, and I've done so much work in sustainability, it's green marketing as they used to call it, and whatever. And I'm with you that a lot of times you see these amazing stories told, but it just seems like they're preaching to the choir, and they don't ever really move the needle, or they're so obfuscated in how they communicate that at the end of it, you're just going, what? What are you talking about? Now, at the beginning of this episode, I played one of my all-time favorite stories, and that is Follow the Frog from the Rainforest Alliance. And they're like, if you really want to protect the rainforest, don't do all these things you dream up in your mind. Just simply vote with your wallet. Look for that label on the product, and if that's the case, then these companies are going out of their ways to protect the rainforest. Now, when I first showed that, I saw it, and I was in New York working for a sustainability group out there doing some storytelling training for them. And when I showed them that, half the room, and now remember, these people are all in sustainability and climate change and whatever, I got pushback. They said it didn't take it seriously enough. It was too funny. It was they were making a joke of it. And quite honestly, Roger, I just thought, what the hell? This is how you get through to the masses out there. You entertain to educate. I sent you a link to that video. I don't know if you had seen Follow the Frog before.
No, I hadn't seen it before, but I thought it was brilliant. And what they say about humor? I mean, it is a really powerful medium. I think often about the court fool in hundreds of years ago who could tell it to how to walk a really fine line, right? They didn't want to insult the king enough to get their head cut off, but often it was that person who was telling it to the king straight, right? That was
speaking the truth.
And sort of taking the temperature down a little bit. You can make someone laugh, you make them feel good. It helps helps the medicine go down, so to speak. And so I thought it was brilliant. The first thing I thought was, man, I wish I had a production budget to do something like that.
Well, your productions are pretty beautiful. When John first introduced us, he said, go and take a look at his work, and it's over at the American Resiliency Project at amresproject.org. I'm sorry, folks. That's amresproject.org. And you can go and see some of Roger's films. But, you are highly decorated, highly rewarded films. And the first one I clicked on to watch the trailer was one called Tidewater. And it deals with ocean rise, especially in the Norfolk area, and the impact it has on our Navy and in our armed services men and women. But what really connected with me, Roger, is my brother Steve lives out just north of Norfolk in a little fishing town called Poquoson. And he is right on the Chesapeake Bay. And his house, the underneath his house gets flooded out 2 or 3 times a year now because of the storms coming up, sea level rise, and he's got to go in, clean out his ducts, fix it up again, and away he goes. So that had a real impact on me because I've got a brother living there, and when I shared your film with him, all he could write back was saying, yeah, it's a real problem.
Yeah, there's somebody in the film that says, I don't care what your politics are, the water still comes in my basement. And that's a perfect example of really framing the story for the targeted result. Our goal was to get people to think about what's going to happen to the military's ability to do its mission if flooding is not addressed. And the phrase climate change doesn't even come up in the film. There were people that said it in interviews, but I admit I made a conscious choice to not include the phrase because I didn't want to change the frame that I was trying to put forward. It wasn't that I was trying to hide the fact that climate change is a problem, but we didn't have time to debate why is the ocean rising? Why is there more water on the roads that lead to the Navy base? Why is the property value for the people who live and work on the Navy base diminishing? And what can we do about it? Are they going to move out of the area? Is the Navy going to have a problem getting its sailors and its personnel to the base? We interviewed people who said it is a problem already. We interviewed someone who said their husband is a navigator on a ship. And when the roads are flooded on a sunny day, keep in mind, this is not just storms. It's high tide on a sunny day. The roads, you have to wait for the water to subside, or you got to go out and buy a bigger truck to get across. A navigator couldn't get to the ship in time. And so what happens then? And so, there wasn't a need to bring up the climate question. And so, it's all about framing. It's understanding your audience. What do you want them to think about, take away? What do you want them to feel while they're watching it? If people are thinking about what's going to happen to my home, what can we do to save my home? What can we do to make sure I can get to work on time? You don't have to get into the questions about climate. You can save that for another day. So I think that, and I have to say, Park, it's hard to measure the success of these films. There's no way to really know that. Again, I come back to the Blackfish example. Yes, there's real empirical data. You can say that SeaWorld had a big hit to its admissions fees after that movie came out. No question about it. For something like this, it's hard to measure, well, was sea level rise solved in the Hampton Roads region because this film came out? No, but you can say that we observed different government agencies who after the film got together and put their heads down and did the work. And it's anecdotal. It's anecdotal evidence. So we've had people tell us, thanks to your film, the director of this particular agency is much more open to having this particular conversation. So it's little steps at a time, and we have to keep our eyes and ears open to see how our films are actually having the success that we intend them to have.
And how many films have you made in the American Resiliency Project?
We have now 6 under our belt. We've been working on some food security stuff. There was supposed to be in 2023 the Farm Bill, which comes up every 5 years. It didn't come up in 2023 for obvious reasons. The Congress did not take it up. They have enough difficulty, keeping the lights on and not closing down the government every 2 months. But it looks like we're going to have the Farm Bill coming up in the next few months. So, again, starting with the policy objective. I started that film because talking to some of our advisors, I asked the perennial question: what's the story that needs to be told to deal with carbon emissions? How can we? What's the best bang for the buck? And the consensus was we got to really look at the agricultural space. There's a lot of emissions there. We're having problems growing our food. Our farmers are struggling. And again, that's something that affects everybody, right? Who doesn't care about the price of food and the accessibility to food? So it seemed like a really good topic to take on. And now we're looking at another film also in the agriculture space, one that's designed to help reduce the amount of chemicals that are used to grow our food, really revolutionizing what is meant by conventional agriculture, not just saying, oh, let's have an alternative to it, but actually go right to the heart of what is this system that we've built over the past 70 years that's highly chemical dependent with proprietary seeds that leave farmers struggling, and how do we transform that systemically?
Of all the movies you've made so far, the documentaries, which one do you feel like has had the greatest impact and why?
Again, I think it is anecdotal. I know that when The Burden came out, I had a lot of folks in the military and national security space that really reacted positively to that and said thank you.
And what was The Burden about?
So The Burden is the film about fossil fuel dependence as a national security threat.
Okay, gotcha.
It was the first film that I made, in response to reading about the threat multiplier that is climate change. And it was a lot of folks in the national security space saying, thank you, now I can talk about this. Now I can bring this up to my boss because I have the frame to do it. Nobody's going to accuse me of being a tree hugger anymore because now I know how to talk about this. And so I feel like that had a really powerful effect. There were a lot of screenings that we did at military bases and in the Pentagon. We had troops calling us up from like a sergeant at a base somewhere around the world saying, "Hey, can we get a link to your film? We have movie night tomorrow." And I felt like that was a really great way to bring the film to audiences that I hadn't really thought about climate change much, but now think about how their mission and the work that they do in the military is really tied to climate and environmental security. So I feel like that one had a really good effect. I think Tidewater also more locally in the Hampton Roads region, as I mentioned earlier, there's 17 jurisdictions there. It's a really tough governmental, to coordinate all those government agencies. There's no real oversight body that tells the 17 agencies you have to do this. And so they really need to work together. And I think this film helped them come together around a particular narrative. And so I'm proud of that. And I think that was a good model for us thinking about our work.
So when our listeners are dealing with big, heavy, complex subject matter, divisive topics, and they are charged with creating some form of communication. It could be a video, it could be a documentary, it could be a white paper, it could be a website, a blog post, whatever. What are some of the tips that you have learned through the trials and tribulations of talking about climate change and global warming and that sort of thing that they could take away to apply in their project?
Well, I'm glad you brought up that list of the different formats, because I think you have to understand first of all, how does your audience consume media? Not everybody's going to sit and watch a 30-minute film, which is our model. And, we think a lot about captive audiences, qualitative audiences. And so, that's a great starting point. I mean, if you're trying to reach young people, forget the 30-minute film. You better get, someone to make some clever videos for TikTok. In fact, we're thinking about that now. We're trying to think about how can we have a presence in some of these other platforms. So it's knowing your audience in as many ways as you possibly can. Media consumption habits. What time do they watch their media, right? If they're looking at it at night, maybe you want to be a little more racy and edgy and have a little more humor, a little more edge to it, let's say. And I think, again, knowing what do they care about, what do they not care about. You don't want to hit them over the head with, berate. You don't want to ever berate your audience, as you know, shame them into not caring enough. Shame on you. You use plastic. You don't want to. We all use plastic, right? You have to have some humility, I think, in your messaging. And so, again, just understanding what they care about, what's their value system, what are the things that scare them, what are the things that inspire them. I personally, I'm not a religious person, but I value the fact that there's an argument to be made in religious circles that is, a faith-based argument about taking care of the planet. I mean, I have a book on all of the passages in the Bible that have just mention of, the exhortation to care for the earth, care for the creatures of the earth. And I try to weave that into conversation sometimes with interviewees. I have had sections or quotes on screen that I have a biblical quote in one of the films because I agree with it. And I think it's going to be effective for the audience that I'm trying to reach. So not to pander or be exploitative, but, understanding that not everybody sees the world the same way. And, you're not going to be effective in your messaging if you can't understand as many different views of the world that exist, which is it's countless. So it's like a real job for us as storytellers to always be doing the research and the homework and always asking questions, always understanding that as much as we know, we're not going to ever know it all. And so, I think humility, if I had to boil that all down to one word, it's humility.
And I guess you'd really have to be non-judgmental about it too. Even though we bring our biases to a project and our judgments to the project, we kind of got to park those, don't we? And really use that humility you're talking about to understand your audience in a godlike way, is what Robert McKee, a famous screenwriting coach, would say, is that to really get between their ears, understand what makes them tick, and then find that common ground. What do they care about that you also care about? And make that connection first, and then show them some options about going through life or plastic use or whatever it might be.
Yeah, so I'm just looking at that Robert McPhee book. I've got it on my shelf. Story. It's a good one.
Oh, his seminar is great. I went to it with our son Parker back in 2008, 2009. Spent 4 days in a very cold LAX Sheridan ballroom with about 300 screenwriter wannabes, and I was just there because I wanted to know, what does Hollywood know that we should be using in our marketing, in our sustainable storytelling. And I got so many pearls of wisdom from that. I've actually had Robert on my show a couple times. A great, very interesting character when it comes to storytelling, first Hollywood, but then how you can apply it in the business world, organizational communications, sustainability, or whatever. Let's also circle back. I'm a big believer in humor, that we take everything so damn seriously. And there's a lot of stuff to take seriously out there, but there's also great ways to bring up very serious topics and communicate them using humor. And one of my favorite ones I want to play here in just a second for the audience. And then when we're done, I would love to get your take on it. It's a little music video, and I will have the actual video in the show notes. So if you want to go and see it, you're going to hear the soundtrack for it. It's called Dumb Ways to Die. And what it was like a metro light rail safety video communicating to commuters about paying attention to the signals and not crossing tracks when trains are coming, and how not to get yourself killed by a metro light rail train in Australia. And it's a very cute little ditty. It's very funny, and I just absolutely love it. And by the way, I heard this for the first time about 10 years ago. When I was running my ad agency in Phoenix called Park & Co., we managed the launch, the branding and the launch of the large Metro Light Rail program in Arizona. So we were right in the middle of it, and we also had to do a training, a safety video for the public out there saying, hey, this new train's going to be on your roads. Pay attention so you don't get taken out by it. And it was about the same time that this particular piece came out, and I just adored it. So let's play it, and then I'd love to come back and hear your thoughts on it. Here we go.
Set fire to your hair, poke a stick at a grizzly bear, eat medicine that's out of date, use your private parts as piranha bait. Dumb ways to die, so up. Teach yourself how to fly. Eat a 2-week-old unrefrigerated pie. Dumb ways to die. So many dumb ways to die. Dumb ways to die. So many dumb ways to die. Invite a psycho killer inside. Scratch a drug dealer's brand new ride. Take your helmet off in outer space. Use a clothes dryer as a hiding place. Dumb ways to die. So many dumb ways to die. Dumb ways to die. So many dumb ways to die. Keep a rattlesnake as a pet. Sell both your kidneys on the internet. Eat a tube of super glue. I wonder, what's this red button do? Dumb ways to die. So many dumb ways to die. Dumb ways to die. So many dumb ways to die. Dress up like a moose during hunting season. Disturb a nest of wasps for no good reason. Stand on the edge of a train station platform. Drive around the boom gates at a level crossing. Run across the tracks between the platforms. They may not rhyme, but they're quite possibly dumbest ways to die. The dumbest ways to die. The dumbest ways to die. So many dumb ways to die.
Be safe around trains. A message from Metro.
All right. Dumb ways to die. Roger, what do you think of that?
Well, I think humor is so key. You know, we're so bombarded with so many serious messages that it's gonna linger. And I mean, coming back to the emotion being the core of storytelling and emotional resonance, music is that same thing, right? I watch that and it's such a catchy tune. You could see yourself just kind of standing and waiting for a train and just kind of humming the chorus. So really brilliant on that front. The only thing that comes to mind for me that if I were in the room when they were coming up with the concept for that, I might have said, well, maybe it's a little too long. Maybe you're going to have to wait a little. What happens if people click away before the last, it doesn't really get to the train safety part until the very end. So I would only worry about the fact that we have such a diminished attention span collectively these days that people don't even have the patience for a 3-minute video. So I don't know the answer. Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I still think it's brilliant. I don't know that I would have come up with a better idea for a safety video, but I wonder about this attention span problem that we all have. Maybe they needed to cut out, a couple of the gags of, the different other dumb ways to die so that they get to the train one a little sooner. But I think it's hilarious.
Well, I know they did use this. They used the piece, and I think they made a video game out of it, and they did lots of other things. And my guess would be, if I was the agency of record, I haven't seen it, but I would say they probably were able to cut some of those down to like 30-second snippets. And so they could become your TV commercial. And then if you want to hear the whole thing, you could do that. I can imagine there's lots of ways to atomize that content. And to your point earlier, use it in lots of different mediums at different lengths at different times, depending on who your audience is.
Yeah, for sure. And, I think humor, it's something I struggle with because the issues that I take on, they're not funny. How do I make sea level rise funny, right? I'm interviewing somebody whose home is flooded out 4 times, and they're on the phone with the insurance company 6 hours a week. I mean, they're not going to laugh about that. I mean, maybe you can look for it, but you really got to be careful. And so I wish there, so I guess the second best option after humor is positivity. Try to have a little optimism Because if you're too negative, that just pushes people away. If you make fear-based communication, the only thing you're going to get out of that is people are going to buy more guns and buy more locks for their doors. They're not going to come out and try to work together and actually have the hope that you need to get it done. I mean, even if it's a false hope, you have to sort of trick yourself into thinking that there's a possible positive outcome. And so I think if you can find humor, that number one, hands down, get humor as your takeaway.
So, Roger, your work that you've been doing with the American Resiliency Project, these amazing documentaries, has also led you to kind of a new chapter in your life, in your career, and that is doing some work, I think most recently with a large airport, where you were telling the airport's sustainability story through very much of the documentarian lens. And that really hits home with me because, again, when we were running Park & Co., our agency represented Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport for 10 years. And so we did all kinds of communication about every aspect of that airport. Back then, they weren't really talking about sustainability issues and greening issues and those kinds of things. They have come on since then. So how did you find yourself in this arena? And tell us about the project that I believe you're just finishing up.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I didn't go looking for it. It came to me. I had heard from a mutual contact who works for the Federal Aviation Administration that he had been in touch with one of the airports that he deals with. And they were just sort of having dinner together. And he said, yeah, we really got to do a better job of telling our sustainability and resilience story. We do all these corporate videos, but we don't really tell that side of our story very well. And if only we could do a documentary. And then my mutual contact mentioned my name and connected us. And, even talking with their public relations team, their internal communications team, they said, yeah, you know what? We don't do documentaries. We do corporate videos. And so we are not going to hire internally to do a documentary film. So we want you to tell our story, our sustainability and resilience story.
And if I can jump in here, Roger, when it says, the corporate video versus documentary, I think I know what they mean. Corporate video is typically blah, 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 and, boring, 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 where a documentary video actually takes you on a journey.
Yes, and emotion being the key difference. I think, corporate videos are sort of just to check the boxes, make sure the CEO has the good soundbite. You show your board and all of your stakeholders that you're doing your work, you're spending their money wisely, and you're done. Or if you're a nonprofit, you're asking for money at the end. They wanted to go to a deeper level, which I really appreciated that. And so they gave me artistic license to tell the story in a way that I think is going to be most effective. I mean, of course, they're going to have the final say on it, and make sure that I'm not going completely,
Sure.
just out of the box with them. But, it's a tricky line too, right? Because you don't want to do the work of greenwashing for anybody. You don't want to, I always joke around and say, I'm never going to do a documentary about how Chevron is protecting sea turtles. It's in this case, they're doing sustainability and resilience work because it saves them money and it improves the traveler's experience. That's what it's all about. It comes back to the military, caring about climate change just simply for blood and treasure, saving lives and money. And so, got me thinking that we as a nonprofit can take our work that we provide, our mission-driven work, and help other companies and large organizations tell the story of their own sustainability and resilience efforts for the right reasons, to bring more people around to support it, so that they can be more sustainable and resilient in the end. And we have to have our antenna up to make sure that we're not going to be complicit in greenwashing. But I think there's a lot of opportunity here now for us as a nonprofit to actually be a service provider to other organizations that really need to tell that story so that they can achieve the mission of sustainability and resilience.
My buddy Bruno Sarda, who is one of the top sustainability professionals literally in the world. I mean, he came out of Dell, did a lot of work there. He and I worked together at Arizona State University. In fact, he's still there doing some work, but he's out in New York and has been at Ernst & Young for quite a while now, heading up their sustainability efforts. And he said, I thought, this is when he was back at Dell working on sustainability. He had told me one time, he said, Park, sustainability is really three things. And when done right, it accomplishes these three things. And you just mentioned it a little bit there, Roger. He said, and I love thinking about this way, when you do sustainability right within your organization, you actually grow revenue. It's good for your business. You will grow business by actually doing less and having less impact on the world. Number two, it decreases risk. So your risk of the impact maybe you're having on the world or the world could be having on you through climate change and global warming, when you're really paying attention to sustainability in your efforts, it will decrease risk. And ultimately, when done right and the story told the proper way, like you do with your storytelling, sustainability enhances the brand. So he boils it down. It builds your business, it reduces risk, and it enhances your brand. And I can't think of three more important reasons why not to do, sustainability. The byproduct of this, it just happens to save our collective asses, right? Because we are protecting our planet and our resources and so forth. But if you think about it from a business mindset, grow your business, reduce risk, enhance the brand.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I just love that. Well, Roger, thank you so much for being here. Where can people learn more about you and the good work you're doing? And if there's an airport out there that's interested in doing a documentary on their work, how do they find you?
So our website is, if you search American Resilience Project, and the website is amresproject.org. That's AMRES project.org.
I think I blew that earlier in the show. Thank you for clarifying.
Right. Yeah, you can watch all of our films for free. We don't charge. Our goal is to get the word out there. So we really want these stories to be told. We just want to raise enough money to make the film, and then we're happy.
Well, Roger, thank you so much. Just a great deal of wisdom here today on how to communicate and tell stories that can really be divisive, to find that common ground and actually have an impact and move the needle. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks, Park. Really appreciate your great work.
Thank you. And thank you for listening and sharing this edition of the Business of Story. Hey, if I can help you and yours grow your business, your confidence, and your career through resilient storytelling, well, please let me know. Check me out over at the contact page on businessofstory.com. Or, of course, you can just shoot me an email directly to me, park@businessofstory.com. And don't forget to start your storytelling training right now by taking our ABTs of Agile Communications micro training course at, you guessed it, businessofstory.com/ABT. Hey, you won't regret it, I promise you. Our show was produced by Caden Howell. Thanks for that, Mo. Music is composed by Darius Holbert, and our community development and marketing is done by the one and only Marissa Hill. Please join me next Monday when you will meet a remarkable influencer who created her brand at the intersection of physics, real estate, and roller skating. Her name is Jackie Cross, the Austin, Texas-based roller skating real estate agent. You're going to love her. Jackie will be here to show you how you can lean into your uniqueness to stand out in a competitive market, just like she has. Until then, though, remember that the most potent and resilient story you will ever tell is the story you tell yourself. So make that one epic. Thanks so much for listening.